and Heels podcast. One handsome devil. Your host, Jack Purcell. Scissor me, daddy ass. Louis Perry, your co-host. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell. Faces and Heels podcast.
Welcome to the Faces and Heels podcast, mother truckers. For another Tuesday night, we're bringing you the heat. And we've got our special guest tonight who's going to be talking all about his new Kickstarter, Mother Trucker. It's going to be the third episode. He's going to be telling you all about it, as well as some other pro wrestling information. I'm sure we're going to get nerdy with the comic book talk. Welcome, Andrew Belanger.
Hey! What's up, guys? You sure it's Belanger and not Belanger?
Yeah, it's Belanger.
Are you sure it's Belanger and not Belanger?
Yeah, I'm positive. I'm super positive.
I know you. Well, I know how you can. I mean, I speak French, and I know you're in Canada, but I see soufflé, pou. See, I don't know. I think it was.
Yeah.
What?
C'est bien. Tu parles très bien.
I don't understand Italian. I don't understand Italian. I'm sorry.
Right.
You're bringing up some of those American stereotypes for us, Louis.
Hey, I'm Italian anyway. Okay, so go ahead. What do you?
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Good. I really appreciate you being here. I have an interesting kind of backstory as to how I got to know who you are. I'm just going to go into quickly because I was at a pro wrestling show for Blitzkrieg Pro in Enfield, Connecticut. And I had done a print for the show that featured a few wrestlers, including Speedball Mike Bailey. And he came over and we were talking. He was being very generous with his thoughts about the artwork. And he was telling me about you. And he's like, have you heard of Mother Trucker? Like, check this shit out. Lethal Comics. And he was going on and on. And he was super enthusiastic about it. So I checked it out and followed you. And then I just kind of kept an eye on what you were doing. And I saw that you had another Kickstarter going. So I'm really glad that you had the time to come on.
Yeah, so that would be Speedball would be my sensei, I guess you would say. He, like we were chatting about earlier with the border stuff, he couldn't get into the U.S. sort of like for a number of years, 5 years. And during COVID, he had been wrestling in Japan, and I think they kind of like did a thing where there was like no travel. So he was kind of stuck back home here in Quebec and Montreal. And we were all like in bubbles, like little social bubbles. So him and I were in a bubble, and every Wednesday we would go at it, and I'd have a match against Speedball Mike Bailey, like now the Speedball Mike Bailey, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So for like 2.5 years, 3 years, we went at it to every Wednesday. And so the reason he is so non-rusty after COVID and he's just kicking ass is because he literally kicked me in the face multiple times every Wednesday for a few years.
Wow. I mean, I guess that's a positive depending on how you look at it. But I mean, That guy is an amazing performer. And I got to see him against Alec Price that night that I was referring to. And man, those guys tore the house down. That would be an understatement.
Yeah. So he I learned so much from him about wrestling. He's like one of the most positive driving forces when it comes to learning about wrestling. No one has as much passion for wrestling as Speedball. He lives it, man. Like if he's like stuck here for like a week or a few days, he's putting on seminars. He's like, we have a show in my studio at Lethal Comics. We were doing our own Twitch show called Friday Night Speedball. And we film it right in my comic book studio, and we put down mats and like beat the crap out of each other like on TV. And we had this hilarious match, him and I, against each other, where we did the 1 chip challenge and then had a match.
Wow. Any milk involved?
Yeah, of course. So I am probably like the world's biggest pussy when it comes to spicy food. So the 1 chip challenge was probably the most psychotic thing I've ever done. And like I got to win the match, but like I was pretty sure death was coming for me. And he had to like go and spend the rest of the night without milk. And like was dying. And we were dying in the match. And when the match was done, I went and drank like a full 2 liter of milk and was like up chucking it in the sink because it was so bad.
Whoa, what was that?
I thought it was supposed to be devil's laughter because he said the devil was coming for him. But yeah.
Gotcha.
It was the devil's playground instead. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Get your crew under control, Lewis. They just waking up. What's going on over there?
Yeah, I know.
Jeez, come on.
I know.
Well, Andrew, I mean, you're right up our alley with your interests. It seems like you've got a big passion for pro wrestling and comic books. Which one came first?
Comic books for sure. I mean, so I always was drawing, right? My parents split up when I was super young, and I was like kind of like left to my own stuff a lot. So I spent all my time drawing. And my father used to pick me up once a week, and we go to a secondhand bookstore. And that bookstore had, in my hometown, had this just like gigantic wall of just comic books. And this is pre-Bags and Boards. So they were all just like, you wouldn't even see the spines. You'd just see the paper at the bottom of the comic. And the guy smoked. So it was just like a yellow wall of paper. And if you remember, they were newsprint. So they would turn yellow pretty quickly. Right. And I got hooked on monster comics, like, you know, anything that had monsters in it, I was really into. I wasn't as much into superheroes. So I was into, you know, Creature Commandos, you know, Tomb of Dracula, Buscema's Frankenstein. Like if there was monster, Werewolf by Night by Marvel, you know, anything that had monsters, I was super into it, you know, and they were really cheap, and I would take them and then I'd go home and draw. But I was also super into wrestling. So I would be drawing Macho Man and Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Jake the Snake Roberts, like fighting Frankenstein and the Wolfman. And yeah, like superheroes always kind of like skipped me over until I was a little bit older. And then I got into, you know, McFarlane's stuff and Jim Lee's stuff at Marvel. That was like sort of like, you know, anything Claremont X-Men I was hooked on as a kid. And you know, Todd McFarlane's work as well. And then I hit 13 and found HeavyMetal magazine, and I quit collecting superheroes and just collected HeavyMetal magazine, which was just European reprints, right? The best of Europe. And that was it. And I really, wrestling wasn't part of my life. Most of the time I was always doing comics. So that's not mine, by the way. I have a giant husky, and he doesn't sound like that.
Well, your giant husky is very well behaved.
Yeah. So, you know, and then I got into becoming a comic book artist. So kind of like Wayne Gretzky with hockey, I always knew and had a driving force to only basically become a comic artist ever since I was 4 or 5. You know, and then when I went pro in my sort of like mid-20s, you know, I spent a decade just doing that. And when I moved to Montreal, there wasn't a lot of wrestling in Ontario. At least you didn't hear about it. Right. And I think Ontario at the time, you had to have special permits and insurance to have full contact sports. So I think it was hard to get those permits. So there wasn't a lot of wrestling as far as I knew. And it certainly wasn't advertised downtown Toronto when I lived downtown. And then I moved to Montreal and I started hanging out with the guys I worked with at UbiSoft. I was doing video game work here and there. Like I animated some videos for Far Cry, and that did well. And I would go with them to live wrestling events and bars and clubs. And I just got hooked on indie wrestling. Like my friends and I go and get drunk and yell at wrestlers. And then I met them. And then it kind of graduated into me doing t-shirts and posters and, you know, all kinds of merch for them. And then, you know, one of my best friends, Shane Hawk, who was part of Chikara, Shane Hawk was like, hey, we're opening a school. Why don't you come to the school? You're a big guy. You know, deceptively, a lot of wrestlers, you know, aren't that tall. They look tall in the ring, but when you're standing next to them, they're not that tall. So I was kind of a taller guy in the scene, and I went, and my first practice match, I was kind of hooked, but that first match where you're in front of a giant audience, that was it. Like I was completely hooked on wrestling. So, that's, I'm basically a giant 13-year-old right now. I draw comics for a living and then moonlight as a pro wrestler with IWS here in Montreal. And we have like a deal with a Fight Network, and, you can watch IWS on Fridays on the Fight Network. It's pretty cool. And I've had lots of matches up there, and it's been super fun. And then, I guess it was 2019. I lived away. I lived in Italy for a year. And when I came back, I started picking up wrestling again, and Speedball was there, and he's like, hey, do you want to do private sessions? And then I got really hooked on strong style, Japanese wrestling. Like for me, I really, really love strong style. I'm a goofy character, so everyone wants more character stuff, but I love strong style Japanese wrestling. It's super cool.
Right on. Wow. I mean, that's a magical combination, being able to be a pro wrestler and comic book artist. I have gigantic, enormous admiration for you pulling that combo together.
They're kind of like the same thing. Like
they are.
I used to struggle with wrestling a lot because there's so many moves you have to remember and so many spots, and you didn't really know how to do it. And then Speedball kind of like, Speedball and Shane Hawk, but Speedball sort of like helped me write my own match. And once I started into it, I realized it was just Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So basically what Star Wars was built on for story structure. You have your shine where the good guy comes out and gets over on the bad guy and looks cool to the crowd, and he's full of fire and big energy, and then the bad guy cuts him off and brings the crowd down and holds, and he's a representation of death. And then you have your Hulk Hogan comeback and a bunch of quick moves again, and then back and forth falsies into like a strike fest, and then you go into a finish, and if the bad guy's gonna win, he's gonna hit you in the balls or cheap you out, and away you go. And I was like, all of a sudden I could remember 200 moves because I knew my parts to that epic tale that we tell for 10 minutes or 20 minutes every time we go out there. I just had a match on Saturday at a place called Ben Mathieu, which is basically a swimming pool they turned into a nightclub. But we wrestle there sometimes. Like sometimes we wrestle at Olympia or Metropolis, the bigger places in Montreal. We normally wrestle there, so you can fit like a couple thousand people. But Ben Mathieu is smaller. But what I like is the ring actually goes into a swimming pool, so it feels like I'm in a Street Fighter level.
Nice. That's
right?
Awesome.
It feels like I'm in Street Fighter. Yeah, because like the fans are sitting like in a pool. It's really weird.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I think venues like that are amazing for pro wrestling, for indie wrestling specifically. I mean, I know I'm a big fan of breweries when they have indie wrestling. Yeah. Those kind of combinations make it even more interesting and sometimes add to the mystique.
Oh, yeah, I agree. They're super cool. Breweries are awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge proponent of beer and wrestling together.
Yeah, they're nice together.
So tell us a little more about Lethal Comics. Like, did you start out working for other companies and then create your own, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, so I've worked pretty extensively for every major publisher almost in comics except for Marvel. So my first break was with Wildstorm, that was owned by DC Comics when I was like in my mid-20s doing Friday the 13th. At the time, they had the New Line licenses, so they had Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Lost Boys. So I started with Friday the 13th there, and then I started working for companies like IDW, Boom, Dynamite, and then I did some work with DC Comics doing Swamp Thing with Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire, and then I'm the kind of guy that always wants to do his own thing. Like, I don't like working on other people's characters a lot. I'd rather invent my own worlds and my own characters. So Image was really exploding at the time. So I was working really hard to get an Image series. And then we had sort of like a hit series called Southern Cross with Image for a few years from 2015 to 2018. And then worked on some TKO. And then when COVID hit, they had a thing in comics called Pencils Down, right? Where they stopped making comics for a little bit. The problem with that is none of us are on salary. Everything's freelance. So it's basically like, guess what? None of you are going to make a dime for as long as this goes. And it was pretty rough. And I had been working on a pitch with Image that completely went belly up with some big name writers, and I was kind of screwed. And then Behavior, the video game company that do Dead by Daylight, sort of like saved the day, and I made a boatload of money doing animation for them and had nothing to do. So the guys at the studio, Lethal Comics Studios, we share with another company called Cut to Bits that do a game called Venture to the Vile that's coming out in November. It's a really cool venue where it's half comics, half video games. And nice. Those guys were all like, well, it's time to do that wrestling comic that you've been writing for years. And it's kind of why I got into wrestling. I wanted to write this great wrestling comic. And that Mother Trucker came out of there. So during that pencils down phase after the animation, I started into it and kickstarted my first one, and we did 27K Canadian. And a little bit later, I did the second one for somewhere in the 30s. And then me and my buddies put together the Psycho Gorman. There's a horror movie called Psycho Gorman, and we did a gigantic anthology that took, like a year and a half to get everyone to do their artwork. Trying to wrangle 35 wrestlers is a lot easier than trying to wrangle 35 artists to do their artwork.
Yeah, for sure. I've been involved in a few anthologies. I can vouch.
All I can say is we may do more anthologies at Lethal, but I'm not going to be the one running it. I'll tell you that. That headache's too much for me while I'm trying to actually do my work.
Right.
Yeah, and then Carl Kerschel, the guy that I share the studio with, he's been running his and doing amazing. So yeah, it just kind of took off, and it was really cool. All of a sudden, we didn't need the publishers. Like, we could make great money by doing our own thing and crowdfunding it. And Carl and I were both big sort of like proprietors about self-publishing the whole time we were in comics, because we always wanted to do our own thing. So it was really just like a really cool way to streamline self-publishing and actually monetize it. I was part of a studio in Toronto called Raid that Carl was also in. And we were some of the first professionals doing webcomics. Guys that worked for DC, Marvel, like we grouped up into a thing called Transmission X. And we were like some of the first guys actually doing webcomics that weren't, that were actually pro at, our jobs was comics. And there was just no way to monetize it. So eventually we all just sort of like fizzled out, and it didn't become a thing. Carl's the only one that kind of kept up with it. And he did a Kickstarter for it recently and made he did like $150,000 on his Kickstarter for his webcomics. And that was, because he'd been doing it for 10 years. He had a great built-in audience. So, it's changing the game.
It's really tricky. I remember when I was with DC getting a letter, I think it was Jim Lee, actually, who had sent it to everybody saying, oh, we're doing these online comics. It's going to be this huge new revenue stream. And, it was like a little trickle. I would never have called it a revenue stream. But when DC and Marvel are having trouble with it, it's kudos to anyone who could figure it out, because it's not easy to navigate.
Yeah, so I was part of that. And you're talking about Zuda Comics. So I had a Zuda comic called Bottle of Awesome. And I kind of like, remember how they had a contest to win to get into it? I kind of like bypassed the contest and was just like, I just got paid to do it. So I had a monthly comic with IDW I was doing called Kill Shakespeare. And twice weekly, I had to produce a webcomic for DC.
Oh, nice.
They were basically looking for Scott Pilgrim.
Right.
The whole thing was basically looking for Scott Pilgrim. Yeah. They're like, look at Scott Pilgrim. Look how well it does. Let's do some webcomics to try and come up with something as good as Scott Pilgrim. So my style was super cartoony, very like kid friendly, very YA. It was a fun story, but like completely doesn't look like anything that I've done. I was gonna like put it online again, and I was looking at all the artwork, and I was like, oh my god, it's so far removed from what I've done for the last decade that I can't do it. It'll
maybe one of these days, the timing will be right.
I'd love to take the story and have someone else do it. That would be cool. Yeah.
Right on. Jay Claus says, damn, Jack, your future tag team partner is here just waiting for you to pump some iron, LOL. Y'all have a lot in common. You just need to step through them ropes. Let's go, my bro. Few O's there. Backyard Games, who I'm actually working on a card game with right now. Awesome job on the Kickstarter. Looks great. It is a killer looking Kickstarter.
Oh, thank you. This is like technically my 5th. So I produced one like that was written and drawn by someone else. I like kind of like my first Dr. Dre. There's a guy in Montreal named Al Gofa. He's really awesome. He's doing backup comics in my Mother Trucker that's coming out right now. And Al has a comic with us with Lethal Comics called Orc Jim. And when he came into the studio, he's like, I want to pitch you guys on a comic. Maybe you guys want to publish. And Carl and I were like, well, Lethal Comics is kind of like a music production studio where, Carl's like Metallica and I'm like Megadeth. And, we just share resources. And he was like, okay, what the comic I want to do is, that movie Pumping Iron by Arnold Schwarzenegger where he's like bodybuilding and stuff. And we're like, yeah. He's like, I want to make that into a comic, but with orcs. And I was like, oh my God, that idea is so good. I wish it was mine. So we produced him and it did pretty well. So yeah, I've done 5 myself. Yeah.
Right on.
And I learned how to do it through Jimmy Palmiotti. So I don't know if you know Jimmy Palmiotti
I do.
at all, but he basically was my mentor. My sort of like big brother and best friend was Darwin Cook.
Oh, wow.
That passed away years ago. Yeah. I was like, him and I were like really, really tight. And he was tight with Jimmy.
Yeah.
So I kind of like, Jimmy has, sort of, become my like big brother kind of friend when I need help. And, if I'm angry at stuff, he can like calm me down. And, Jimmy's really great. And he's shown me like a ton. And then the other guy that, I've talked to is, like Brian Polito. And I was doing some Lady Death covers for Brian Polito. And that guy's a powerhouse on Kickstarter. Just like
he sure is.
The absolute powerhouse. And, I did a few covers for him. And, he's kind of like the model that we're looking at and trying to build our company into something like that.
Yeah, really that's a good one to follow. Those 6-figure Kickstarters are good ones to follow. And Jimmy Palmiotti is still doing the paper films, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, tell us more about what we have right now, because there's a limited amount of days that our listeners and viewers can participate.
7 days to go.
Oh, yeah, we got 7 days to go. Oh, my God. So when you buy a comic from me for Mother Trucker, it's like the most stacked thing. Like, it's a package. So not only do you get the comic book, but you get, like the last time you got 6 trading cards, this time you get 12. You get centerfold posters. You get, if we get past 30K, I do like an art book like I did last time, like a 40-page art book. I don't know if you guys remember this, but you used to go to Comic-Cons and we used to hunt down sketchbooks by like certain artists.
Oh, I remember.
Like Dave Johnson's sketchbook, yep. Or like, like Adam Hughes would have sketchbooks, and Eric Kennedy, we'd hunt those things down and collect the crap out of them. Well, that's what I wanted to do for this. Oh yeah, totally. So, we collected the crap out of those things and we loved it. So that was sort of one of the things I always, try to get to. And then we do, I do multiple stickers. This time I'm doing a patch. I did an enamel pin last time and it was a nightmare. I'll never do pins again. They're a weird shape. Yeah. They're a weird shape and they kind of screwed up a lot of stuff with shipping. So I'll never do pin, and they're expensive. So I'll never do pins again, but we're going to do patches this time. So you get like this pretty amazing package. And then I normally do like, 8 to 10 covers, like bonus covers. I get all my friends to go in there. So this time I've got like Matteo Scalera, who I think is probably, the top comic artist working today. Like,
yeah, he's in my top 5. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. And when I was in Italy, I went and visited him. And, we hang out at Comic-Cons and he did a cover and it was just like unreal. And Carl always does me a cover, and, I have a few pals. And then this time I just did a ton of covers myself because, a lot of these Kickstarters guys, they got to spend all this money on getting 1 million covers by 1 million guys. And, I've done so much Mother Trucker that I was like, oh my God, why don't I just do a whole bunch of extra covers? So, that we got 10 covers on the go. And then a friend of mine who is a kind of famous photographer in LA. His name's Alan Amato. And he has his own line of Kickstarters that he puts out with comics and photography. But his day job is he photographs celebrities, and sometimes he gets like porn stars and stuff like that. And I have another friend who is like a big genre film director in Montreal, and he became a porn director in LA, and that's where we met Anna Fox. So he had known Anna Fox, and Anna Fox liked my work, so I did a drawing for her. And then out of nowhere, Alan was talking to her, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to do a cover for this guy." And she was like, "Oh my God, I know him. I know his comics." And then she went and cosplayed as one of the characters for fun. So Alan hooked me up with a sort of like one of those sort of Dynamite comics, Vampirella style cosplay covers. And she's been really amazing about it, like on her social media, like tweeting about it and stuff. It's been really great. And,
yeah, they look fantastic.
Oh yeah, he's so talented. Like he does like legit gigantic stars like Billy Bob Thornton and tons of crazy people. Like he's so talented. He wants me to do a comic for him coming up. So we're gonna kickstart another comic that he's gonna write and I'm gonna draw. So
there's your Anna Fox cover right there.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, there's actually 3 different images.
Yeah.
And I unlocked the mystery cover today, and the mystery cover is the drawing that I initially gave her of her as the character.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, right there in the corner on the right. So that's the main cover in the middle there. And that cover on the right, that's the bonus cover I unlocked today. That's the drawing I actually gave her.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Now, I
it was really
believe we saw that down here. Hold on one second.
Yeah, so there's tons of original art, too, that's up for sale. I got stuff from WWE when I worked for WWE. I have stuff from Vampirella. I have, mini print sets. Like, when I go to Comic-Cons, my prints do really well. I have a lot of Marvel and DC prints. So I'm doing a bunch of mini prints on here. A lot of, like, original artwork I have in the studio. Yeah, it's really great. And then I did these what if pieces that are doing really well, where I kind of like look at a different artist, like what would happen if Jack Kirby drew Mother Trucker. Yeah, it's super fun. Yeah, there's another. That's a poster. So that's a centerfold poster that comes with some of the different tiers.
Right on.
Yeah, super cool. She's such a good sport, real sweetheart. Yeah, there I am.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, big swan dive right on top of. Who do we got there? Frankie the Mobster, the Beast King, and then we have Zach Patterson, and that's my tag team partner, Sexy Eddie, on the right there. Sexy Eddie's a pretty famous wrestler in the indie scene. If you know who Joey Ryan is, Joey Ryan got all his tricks and his stuff from Sexy Eddie.
Interesting.
So Sexy Eddie's my tag team partner right now in IWS, and we just have a blast. He's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, very cool.
So my Fed that I come from is actually where Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens came from. It was the indie Fed that they were a part of. So all the guys I wrestle were the guys they came up with. So Sexy Eddie, Green Phantom, PCP Crazy Manny, Shane Hawk, all these guys wrestled Sami Zayn, who was El Generico, and Kevin Owens, like before they went pro.
Yeah, the Steen, excuse me,
yeah,
Kevin Steen days. Yeah, right.
Yeah, the Kevin Steen days. Yeah,
right on.
Yeah, so it's really cool. Like the wrestling scene in Montreal is wild, but like the comic scene we're doing too is really cool. And it was funny. I was at a show in South Carolina a few weeks ago, and I was out for dinner, and one of the guys, a buddy of mine, Mark, mentioned he was like, we were just talking about art and the state of comics, and he was like, "You're one of the guys to watch in the Iron Age." And I was like, "What's the Iron Age?" He's like, "It's the age where, the creators are taking everything back. They're producing the comics themselves. It's not about Hollywood. It's not about making comics that are going to be movies. People are making comics for comics again." And that's what Lethal's all about. Lethal's all about making comics for comics. I don't make movies. I don't have anything to do with that world. So, I have to focus on making comics and selling comics.
So can we find your comics in stores? I mean, do you use Diamond or how does this work? Exclusively Kickstarter?
So Mother Trucker is exclusively Kickstarter and off our website right now because we don't know how to justify having it in stores if you're going to back it on Kickstarter. We might do something with the trades, but then I'm also kind of like, why wouldn't I just do a Kickstarter for the trade?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to justify some of the percentages that you're going to be sacrificing to have Diamond carry your book in the first place. But I mean, I guess that's sort of the big question is, do you use distribution? Do you do it yourself? What's the financial end of that? I mean, it's a tough one. I know when I was doing Malice and Mistletoe, there's no way we were going to use Diamond. We ended up using Amazon, and was actually a pretty good deal. That worked out well for us. Yeah, it's worth checking out. There's all kinds of ways to do it now. Like you said, really the creators are in many ways taking things back, and it's like in music. You don't necessarily need a label. I don't have to work for Marvel and DC. It certainly helps to build your resume by doing that, and after you do, you can kind of more easily do your own material.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do have a quick question about the Kickstarter. How do you I see that you have both currencies. You have Canadian currency and US currency. How do you actually determine if you're going to back and you want a specific the tier? Excuse me, it's been a long day for me. That's why I'm so quiet tonight. You have pledge CA $17 or more, then it goes about $13 US. It says about. How do an average person or a person like myself right now, long day, not, like, oh my God, I just want to go to bed, but I really want to back this project. It says about 13. How am I going to, do I put in 14? How do I know? Because I really want to get this. I really want to get this tier, this digital catch-up pack. I really want to get this, or the digital lethal mega pack. How do I know I'm hitting the target for you?
The reason I always put approximately is because the currency always fluctuates. You know what I mean? Like one day, like no, you guys are crushing us right now. So American is worth so much more than Canadian. And like when I'm pricing stuff, I try to figure out more what's fair in US dollars versus Canadian. So I kind of look at I'll basically go through all the Kickstarters and look at prices and come up with average of prices, not just for the comic, but also shipping. I look at shipping, right? And there's different things I can do with shipping. And when it, like, you know what's crazy is it's cheaper for me to ship you guys books than it is for me to ship it in Montreal.
Is it really?
Yeah, how crazy is that?
Wow.
Yeah, that is really weird. I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah. So you know how you were talking earlier about getting stuff over the border for, picking up your shipment. Right. We have a guy that can, depending if it'll still work, he can like get down there with our packages sometimes. And then we ship it like through the United States, like on Indicia or something like Pirate Ship or something. And like, even just using regular US mail, like a comic book to ship a comic book for me might be $7-8. It's like $12 here or $13.
That's crazy.
Just to go like a few blocks.
Wow.
It's so like Canada Post has gone insane.
Yeah.
Like,
I thought our post office went insane.
Right. Yeah. So right now I ship all of my books to the US to ship back to Canada. Because it's like $3 cheaper or $2 cheaper. So you might as well, right? Like,
yeah, right.
It's wild. And most of my packages are from Canada. But yeah, the reason I put approximately that's how much is because that currency fluctuates so much. And actually this round of Kickstarters, I'm charging less than all my other ones.
Okay.
I'm giving people a little bit of a deal compared to it. I used to charge I think $4 or $5 more for everything before, and I'm actually like giving people a deal. I'm going to do more than one Kickstarter for Mother Trucker this year. So,
all right, cool. What's the difference between the Grindhouse edition and the Fubar edition for our viewers and our listeners?
The Grindhouse edition is one that I put together, and I thought it was like, when I was working on it, I thought it felt like a Grindhouse poster or something very like Grindhouse cinema. The Fubar one is by Matteo Scalera, who is like an insanely famous artist. So yeah, those are the differences. Once you get into it, it's like who the artist is. And
okay.
I always like giving stuff cool names. Like all my tiers, I try to give them all like funny
I
cool
know.
names.
I don't know if it's... I'm still looking at them. Like the most intriguing one, I mean, is the Ketchup Pack edition.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
I don't know. I didn't come up with that. My buddy who runs the video game studio came up with that. He's like, yeah, let's just call it Ketchup Pack. And I was like, hey, that's kind of funny.
All right,
so
now
we stuck.
Now this is Jack's favorite one. I'm gonna assume the Heat Not Safe for Work Grindhouse Edition. Care to elaborate on that one?
Yeah, it's exactly like the Grindhouse Edition, only her top has fallen off.
Oh, see, there you go, Jack. You can get that. You're all set. See, you're
yeah, no problem.
I'm
no
well
problem.
over 18. I'm certain I could make that happen.
So to elaborate on this, my favorite comics were always European comics and HeavyMetal magazine. I've been published by HeavyMetal magazine multiple times. Most notably, I did a really big thing for Megadeth. I was in the big Megadeth book, and they used my artwork for a lot of stuff. And I'm a big metalhead. And, you know, Simon Bisley is like my uncle. He's like one of my best friends. And Simon, you know, I've just always been into that kind of stuff. I want adult comic books. And in a world right now where every single publisher is trying to make YA comic books, let's turn every title into a YA comic book that looks like it's for an 8-year-old, which is fine. I feel like, you know, the reason I really love comics is when I was 13, you know, I went to the comic book store and started reading HeavyMetal, and it felt adult. And when I was a kid, I wanted stuff from the top shelf. I wanted stuff that, you know, adults might read. And I just feel like they don't get it anymore. Even at HeavyMetal magazine, that magazine's fallen apart, and they don't even do that stuff anymore. So if they're not going to do it, like, I sure as shit am. And that's kind of what I dig. And there's a lot of it on Kickstarter. And Brian Pulido, you know, I collected Lady Death back then. I have a kind of funny history with Brian Pulido. He was like one of the first guys I went to when I was like, you know, 18, 19, and 20 for my portfolio reviews. I would go to San Diego Comic-Con and other Comic-Cons with my portfolio. And Brian was always cool enough to sit with me and go through every page of my art. And he always gave me the best advice. And he is the guy that first gave me the advice, you know, this is great stuff, but, you know, you're going to want to do your 1,000 pages. And once your 1,000 pages are done, you're going to really start to find out who you are. And he was like completely right. Like my goal was always to get onto a monthly series so I could grind out those 1,000 pages to really get better at the craft. And like, I owe a lot to Brian for a lot of the advice he gave me. And look at that guy. He's just like, he's like my biggest inspiration right now, him and Jimmy Palmiotti. Just the stuff they're doing on Kickstarter and his comics. You know, the reason I loved his comics is because seemed like they were for adults. They're rebellious. They're kind of, it's like freedom, you know? And the funny thing is, you know, my comic is kind of a satire. It's kind of about how, you know, in North America, we have a complacency about violence, but if we see some nudity, we freak out. Right. And
well, that's dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
That's dangerous
so if you
stuff.
read the comic, every time she gets naked, the fans freak out and they call the cops.
Yeah. I mean, hey, you can get canceled left and right these days.
Well, that's what it's about. She's getting canceled in her own comic.
I tell you, it was, you know, looking for graphics to do the graphics for your spot for Jack. I do all the graphics. I was trying to find one, and I did find one. I was like, oh, that would be cool, but she's topless. I'm like, I can't do that one.
I give everyone that. I try to have all the stuff online, have like, you know, the parental advisory things you used to find.
I noticed that as well. I mean, there is a thing, you know, there's a saying that says sex sells. So your Kickstarter is, I mean, it's going strong, man. You are like up there. You're getting there. You're at 19,296 at this moment. Pledged of an $8,820 goal. Now, is that American or Canadian?
That's American.
See,
that's American.
Okay.
So you could, like in Canada, that money goes a lot farther. So, you know, like I print up here and, you know, it goes farther up here.
Well, the good news is the last Kickstarter project that we had promoted, 2 or 3 weeks ago, got over the line to its goal about 10 minutes after the podcast. And now they're, you know, they did nicely. They got over the finish line. So I'd like to think we might be able to help make that happen. And hopefully you'll be in the 20s by the time we're done yammering.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, that'd be so cool. Well, I'm trying to push to get to the point where I can afford to do that art book. Because I think that's the coolest thing. Like when you get a 40-page art book, like those sketchbooks you get at a Comic-Con with your comic, like if I was, I think I'm the only one that does it, right? But I knew, like, when you're doing these packages for Kickstarter and whatnot, I think back to the 80s. What were the cool things we used to get in the 80s? Because the 80s had like the coolest sort of stuff that you would get in cereal boxes and at McDonald's and all that stuff. I try to think back to that stuff, but really the number one thing that I loved going to Comic-Cons was collecting sketchbooks. The sketchbooks were so cool. So, I'm trying to get to that 30 Canadian to produce another one of those sketchbooks, and then everyone gets one for free.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing yours, because I can tell you, I think that a Kickstarter like yours is what I think will keep people who are remaining on Kickstarter happy. I know that maybe I won't name names, but I was kind of mad when I got the art book from a Kickstarter that had earned over $250,000, and it ended up being like a little video game pamphlet. And I mean, I hit the roof. I'm cool. Like, are you serious? Like, I just supported this for about $250, which I don't do all the time. And this is what I got. And I remember there was a huge upheaval. And that's the kind of reason I think people go running from Kickstarter, is when people don't deliver on, and especially when they're big names in the industry, who are super mega Marvel stars and all this. So it's really cool to see you kind of reinforcing your reputation in comics, putting out that quality product. And I'm really hoping that we hit that 30,000 so I can check out your new sketchbook.
Yeah,
Jack, one of our teammates has a comment.
Oh, yes. Emily says the yammering makes the magic happen. It'll happen. Yes, Emily. I like your positive attitude.
That's awesome. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, she's going to be co-hosting with you in a couple weeks, by the way.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. That'll be fun. We'll have a good time without you.
Yeah, and then
doing this stuff is super exciting. It's the most fun that I've had making comics. And like, whenever anyone sees the work I'm doing on Mother Trucker, they can immediately tell. And when my buddy Darwin Cook was passing, I was hanging out with him, and he said to me, by the time you're 40, you got to stop drawing other people's scripts. Like, of all the friends that I have, like, when it comes to making stories, when you draw your own stories, it's a completely different world than when you're drawing for someone else. He was like, you have this, crazy mind for coming up with stories. You're an amazing storyteller. Stop grinding out on other people's stories and start becoming a cartoonist yourself. And he wrote and drew everything he ever did. And, the first thing I wrote and drew, which was like some of Southern Cross, I had done by the time I was 40, but I really wanted to get into like writing or drawing my own stuff.
Uh-oh. That means it is time for Alternate Universe LLC in New Haven and in Milford, where tomorrow is New Comic Book Day. Make sure you stop in and get your new comics from Eric and the gang. If you're not in the area, Eric will ship to you, so make sure you contact him with all your comic book needs, as Eric brings you old school trivia. Now, Animal, you are the guest.
Okay, here we
go. That
go.
means you get to go first when you answer this question. Jack, please pay attention. And those of you at home watching, please shout at the TV. Shout at us right now and answer this question. Who was known as Moose Myers? Who was known as Moose Myers? Was it King Kong Bundy, Bull Nakano, George the Animal Steel, or Big Swede Hansen? Who was known as Moose Myers? Jack. Oh, no, actually, Animal.
Yes,
I have no idea, but I'm going with Bundy just because I love Bundy. No. If we're just going to guess, I got to go George the Animal Steel.
You're going to go with...
Animal. Animal to animal.
You are correct. And Jack, he is correct. Who were you going to say, Jack?
Well, of course I was going to say George the Animal Steel. Who do you think you're talking to, Louis?
Yeah, no, you were not going to say George Animal Steel. Jack, were you? Jack,
It was
in your
between
heart
him
of
and
hearts.
King Kong Bundy.
Hold on 1 second. You were going to say King Kong Bundy, Jack. Really?
I almost did too.
All right. So, yes, and it is true. It is George the Animal Steel. We want to thank Eric and the gang over at Alternate Universe LLC in Milford in New Haven. Make sure you stop down and see those guys where it's New Comic Book Day tomorrow. Have some fun and tell them that you were sent by the Faces and Heels podcast, where you can find them on the Angry Geeks Network.
Emily's on fire tonight. She says, oh, I was going to say trick question. That was Lewis's old wrestling name.
No, it wasn't Emily Deer. You know what my old wrestling name was.
The guy with the purple hair.
Yeah, the guy with the purple hair. That's what it was. Jack, when you worked for Marvel, you worked directly with Stan Lee, correct?
Well, I worked with Stan Lee, but not for Marvel. It was
I know. Well, no, because we just had a question off on the side. YouTube is having problems posting comment. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to our guest.
Oh, all right. We're back on track. So we have 7 days left. We're already over the line. So meeting the goal isn't really the issue. Now it's a matter of getting to that sketchbook. So I didn't see anything on there. I might need to go back. But are you promoting the 30,000 stretch goal?
Oh, I will. Right now, it's like every $1,000 that we unlock, you're getting part of the 12 trading card set. So there's like a trading card every $1,000, and it'll go up to 12. And I should probably start promoting the art book, like probably Thursday or Friday. But the art book I did last time too. So anyone that got number 2 got an art book. So this time I'm doing another 40 pages with like completely different artwork from the other one.
So for some of our listeners who this is new to, do you have options to do add-ons for prior projects?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I have like there's a lot of add-ons.
So
yeah, there's lots in there.
How many? Like, what do you have? Can you give us an idea of what else you could do for add-ons?
I have all the covers. I have like 2 different print sets. One safe for work, one not safe for work. I have original artwork tiers. A lot of the original artwork was getting snapped up. I have T-shirts. Gosh, what else do I got? There's just there's a boatload of add-ons in there that you can go with, and like all the covers are add-ons too.
But I could pick up Mother Trucker 1 and 2. Like, could I pick up like past projects that you've done for other companies like Image? Are you working any of that stuff in there?
So there's a few higher tiers that have a mystery box, and that's when I throw those in there.
Gotcha.
Right, like those trades are heavy. So trade 1 and 2 for Southern Cross, they're like big 160-page books, and they weigh a ton. So I didn't put them on there, but it's not a bad idea for next time. I might put them, because I just ordered 2 boxes of Southern Cross 1 for when I do Comic Cons, and I have like, oh my god, a shelf full of trades for part 2 that they sent me that I haven't sold yet. So there is stuff, but if you get a mystery box, I throw all kinds of stuff in that mystery box, and they're with some of the higher tiers. But
that's awesome. And I mean, I love Matteo Scalera's work. He's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, everybody you've mentioned, I'm a big fan of. Frank Quitely is another guy, man. If there was a request on my part as a fan, it would be get a Frank Quitely cover if you could make that happen.
I know Frank. And I see him at shows sometimes. He's always quite busy, and he's not the most fast artist in the world. So trying to get him to do it. The one who keeps teasing is Paul Pope. So I'm really good friends with Paul Pope, and Paul keeps teasing that he's going to do it. And I'm like, okay, we'll do it. I'll pay you. And he just never does. And same with Bisley. Bisley, Bisley will be like, okay, I'm ready to do it. I'll be like, okay, do it. And then he gets busy. So I can probably get a Bisley before I can get a Pope, and I can probably get a Pope before I can get a Quitely.
Well, yeah, you definitely got them in progression of speed for sure, because I've seen Simon draw in person many times, and he is capable of turning it out. Where I
Oh my god, yeah.
I don't think the
But
other
if
guys are
I
known for
got
that.
one, if I got one from Simon, I would want like one of his crazy painted ones, and
Oh
he
my
knows
God,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I gotta say
He knows what I want.
one of the craziest pieces of artwork that I ever got to see in person was at the old Words and Pictures Museum. I don't know if you've heard of that. It used to be in
Oh yeah.
Northampton, Massachusetts. Kevin Eastman owned it. There was a painting, a giant oversized painting that Simon did for, it was the Fact 2 project. And oh my God, he had Julie Strain as the main character. And it was, you could sit there, you could put that in the MoMA or the Guggenheim, and it would compete with any classic artist. That guy's technique is unbelievable. And when he puts the time in and gives it that polish like those, there's nothing better.
Yeah, that's
Just
what
don't ask
I'd
him to
want.
sign his name.
Yeah, there's some funny signing party
Yeah.
stories. That's
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm friends with both Bisley and Fabry. Good friends with Glenn Fabry too, and you know they're expensive, and you want to make sure that you're getting like that full painting sort of thing. And you know, if I get these Kickstarters a little higher, I'll get those guys for sure.
Yeah.
So, we have we're closing up on the hour, but I want to know who was the inspiration for the character Mother Trucker. Who did you model her after someone?
What's crazy is this comic was supposed to be called Truck Off, which is like the you know, my WWE is called Truck Off, and the big rig guy in the first comic was meant to be the hero. And I moved to Italy with my wife, who was at a crazy painting school called the Angel Academy for high realism. She's an amazing painter. While I was back in Italy, you know, all that 13-year-old Andy came out again, and I was like in, you know, flea markets buying Maneras and Mobius and Serpieri and all those awesome heavy metal artists, but like actually in Italy in Italian, finding crazy stuff you can't find in North America. I think I brought back a suitcase full of European comics. It was wild. And I started reading that again. I was like, maybe I should make this about his wife, who I already had named Mother Trucker. And then at that time in 2019, Charlotte Flair was just dominating. And the things Charlotte Flair was doing in the ring, you know, and like title after title. And I got inspired by Charlotte Flair. So she's kind of like this weird mix between like Wonder Woman and Charlotte Flair, and you know, that's sort of like where that character came from. And I just had a blast like writing her and drawing her, and you know, it became like almost like My Lady Death. And I'm toying with like after the 6 story arc that I'm gonna do with these 6 comics. And what's funny is with Mother Trucker, they're all sort of like separate stories. Right? No matter what, there's a wrestling match in it. It has its own story, right? But there's going to be 6 of them. I might go and do Truck Off after that, and Mother Trucker will be in that with Big Rig. So I haven't decided, but I actually wrote the issues 6 to 12 or 7 to 12 before I wrote 1 to 6 of Mother Trucker. So yeah, I guess you could say like Charlotte Flair and her domination of women's wrestling, and her match a few years ago at WrestleMania with Rhea Ripley was hands down one of the most awesome matches I've seen. It was fantastic. Yeah, they put on a banger. It was amazing. Yeah,
it's a winning combination. So right now, what are, if you were to say, I don't know if you're a big favorite guy, if you have favorites, but what's the favorite, say, 2 comic books that you're reading right now that you didn't do? And what is your favorite pro wrestling TV show that you're watching? I don't know if you have IWTV or you mentioned Fight. What are your favorite comics and wrestling promotion?
Well, I watch New Japan like to death. I have it on every day. New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I'm a big New Japan guy, and like Speedball being part of Super Juniors, like he knows how much I was freaking out for sure. He knows I'm sitting there watching it every day, just losing his mind. Because when we trained together, he was like, all I did was talk about New Japan because he's strong style. And he was like, oh, you know, I'd love to go to WWE. And I'm like, no, you have to go to New Japan.
Yeah, so good call.
He had a match against Tanahashi. He had a match against Ishii during WrestleMania. So, you know, it was mind blowing watching him wrestle all the guys that I had been freaking out for years. And modern comics, I'm not reading a lot of modern comics at the moment, like stuff that's coming out current. Me and Carl found a warehouse here in Montreal that have like 30,000 comics, and like half the comics they haven't even like put into the system. So there's like just these white boxes with like alphabetized letters, and we have completely re-grabbed our childhood. And I'm back to reading all of Claremont's X-Men again. And what's funny is, back then I thought Jim Lee was the man, and I feel like I'm gravitating towards Romita Jr.'s Claremont stuff.
Really? Whoa.
Yeah,
there's a contrast.
Like, yeah, Carl was like, you know, Romita Jr. back then, that would have been like, people wouldn't have liked if you said that. And I'm like, God, they're good books. They're really good books. And I've met Romita Jr. a bunch of times. I hung out with him last summer. And then the other one is Punisher War Journal by Carl Potts and Jim Lee. And I was at a convention in San Francisco in November. And I was sitting beside Jim Lee, and Carl Potts was over here. And I didn't realize Carl Potts is the guy that got Jim Lee into comics in the first place. And he was doing all his layouts on Punisher War Journal. And then he became and writing the script. And then he became like a big editor. And there's Punisher War Journal 4, 5, 6, where he fights Sniper, which is basically kind of like Lethal Weapon, where Sniper's going around whacking all the guys in Punisher's Vietnam platoon that were survivors of the Vietnam War, all the way up until he gets to the Punisher, because they were dealing drugs, you know, over the border from Vietnam to the United States. So he's like, Sniper's trying to cover it up, and he just has a showdown with the Punisher, and it's some of the coolest sort of like action war comics going. So, you know, as far as new stuff, I'm not reading a lot of like new current stuff. I read King of Spies by Mateo, obviously, because he's like my buddy.
Yeah, it's fun.
But yeah, like a lot of my favorite artists aren't actually like doing interiors right now. You know, like I think Dan Panosian has something coming out with Snyder, and Dan's a good buddy of mine. You know, Olivier Coipel doesn't seem to be doing it like a whole lot. My buddy Wes Craig has a book called Kaya with Image right now that's super cool. So I read my buddy's stuff.
Well, I hope you've read Do a Power Bomb.
Oh yeah, of course. I just met him like last summer. Yeah, it was really cool. But like, I've met him a few times. You'd think we'd be like best buddies because we love metal, we love wrestling. But I've only met him like the one time and never really talked to him. He's kind of a quiet guy.
Give yourself a year or two.
I love his work. Yeah, I love his work.
Yeah, no, really he's cool. Phenomenal. That Beta Ray Bill miniseries he did for Marvel was maybe the only thing I bought from Marvel in the last decade, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, same.
All right, so, Jack, we are at the 2-minute warning. So
yes.
For TV time, we have to call it quits. So please have our guest pimp himself. Tell people where they can find him. We'll throw up that Kickstarter link one more time.
Thanks, guys.
There it is. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, please,
thanks, guys.
Give us that last push for our listeners and all our viewers to try to jump on and get this comic in their hands.
Yeah, last 7 days, it's going to be crazy. I have like more cards, more art, tons of stuff coming. We had this one really well planned. So there's lots more coming in the next 7 days. It's going to be crazy. And then, the books are going to come out in August, and then I'm going to go again on part 4. This one's kind of like my Empire Strikes Back. It's like it gets dark for Mother Trucker, so it's really cool. And my bad guy is finally in this one, and he's kind of like a cross between Ric Flair and Jay Lethal. So it's kind of really, really, really cool. Yeah. He's a big dickhead. Super cool. But you can find me at that Kickstarter, lethalcomics.com. You can buy some of our other stuff if you ever want to. We have a bunch of different artists on there with their comics. You can find me at Andy Belanger on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, and follow along. People, I don't think they know what to make of my Instagram and my social media, because like all of a sudden they're looking at art, and then all of a sudden they turn around and they see a guy in a mask with like fur shoulder pads jumping off top ropes. It kind of like I don't think they know what to make of it.
It's the kind of Instagram that I like. So good stuff. I'm an appreciator of it. And
Thanks.
so we're going to hopefully have all of our viewers jumping in to be a part of the Mother Trucker.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, guys.
And
that'd be badass. Yeah.
And if you're also looking for some non-Mother Trucker artwork, I am going to be coming out with a lot of artwork for Backyard Games on a game called Fugitive on the Run. That Kickstarter is happening in September. We'll talk more about that at the end of the summer. Jack Purcell Inc. on Facebook and Instagram. If you're looking for commissions, the list is open. All kinds of wrestling prints, etc., including the new Jake the Snake. And then we got this guy over here.
You can find me each and every Monday night with my sister from another mister, the one and only, that Wonder Woman, Jamie Dolan. And she's not our sidekick anymore. The little girl, she grew. She flew away. Our co-host, the one and only Emily Mae Partington, a.k.a. Quinderella, on the Angry Geek Show. We'll play that ad in 1 second because I do have to answer. Jay Kennedy, no, never, ever, ever, never will we talk about that. We love you guys. We'll see you guys next week. You can find us on Pod TV, Roku, Amazon. Go to the Angry Geeks Network website. You can download whatever you want to there, or go to wherever you find your favorite podcast and let's listen to us. And once again, you can find me each and every Monday night. You have been watching The Angry Geek Show on Pod TV. Visit our website today. And for guest bookings, email us at theangrygeekshow@gmail.com today.